Hey, I'm Doug, and welcome to this video on the brand new Brown Sound7879 TONEX Signature Collection. 3 things you want to know before we take a little bit deeper dive on some of the backstory of that era and some cool things that I think you might want to know about, especially regarding some of the links down below. All right, number 1. This collection is made up of 50 tone models. And in case you don't know, a tone model is a combination of amp captures and cabinet captures. For the demo you just heard there at the top, and by the way, you can download that preset. By the way, if you don't already own the Brown Sound collection, you're going to get that error right there. But once you pick it up, you can use my preset. And literally, I was playing through the sounds that you heard, utilizing my Joe Satriani TONEX 1 signature pedal. I mean, it's just insane that that sort of tone was coming through something I can literally hold in the palm of my hand. In any case, that preset's available down below for free. Again, if you don't already have the collection yet, you're going to get that error. But either way, you're going to get the reverb setting that I was using, most notably the pre-delay and the color. Although they were not on, built into that preset is the short delay for, quote-unquote, the Echoplex that I had set up that's basically going into the front end of the amplifier because it's simulating what we did back in the days. You didn't have effects loops and Marshall amplifiers, so Eddie was running that Echoplex into the front end of the Marshall. And you would have heard that on songs like Ain't Talking About Love. The other thing is although, again, it wasn't used in the demo at the top of the video there, I've also recreated the sound of that kind of vintage MXR flanger. All right, number 2. The thing about these tones is that from the ground up, they built a replica of Eddie's 68 Plexi, and the sound of the amplifier, it's just nuts. So like kind of if you've ever worked with a bunch of IRs, you just kind of go through, each one's a little bit different, largely based on which cabinet you're going to pull up, and you can pull up separate different cabinets and captures if you want to, but you can also pull them up paired together. And then in turn, which variation of the amplifier, and in terms of where the Plexi was set in terms of the Variac and the Van Halen 2 era capture, they were using 4 tubes versus 2 tubes for the Van Halen 1 stuff, all sorts of groovy stuff. And there are links down below, including one over to the IK Multimedia site, which, by the way, that's an affiliate link. So if you happen to pick this thing up, I make a little something on the back end, which is, of course, appreciated. In any case, that's going to tell you all sorts of crazy detail about the whole process that they went through. All right. Number 3, and I think this is the thing that matters most, is I've never, ever played anything that sounded as close to this tone and the feel of arguably the album, Van Halen 1, that was really kind of, if you will, the soundtrack to my life. So if you've been looking for this tone, IK's got you set up. All right, now what I want to do is I want to talk a little bit about the backstory of that era and share a couple of things that I think, if you're a true diehard, giant Eddie fan, some things that you might not know about that you might want to. So we're going to talk about that now. So back in 1978, little Dougie marched into the record factory and bought the Van Halen 1 album. Heard it on the radio. They used to have this thing called the radio. It's how you heard about new music. And that year, in July 23rd, a Sunday, Van Halen played at the Oakland Coliseum in the San Francisco Bay Area at a day on the green. A guy named Jas Obrecht, who at the time was an editor for Guitar Player magazine, did the first ever interview with Eddie Van Halen. The link for that is down below. And one of the things that they talk about, Eddie talks about, learning how to play piano, and that he actually read music and was a trained pianist, like really had his thing together on the piano before he started playing guitar. So it kind of answers kind of some of the background about how, especially as I was playing through these songs and just thinking about all the transitions and how they made sense musically and diatonically, and when there were modulations, and all the incredibly smart things, gave you a little bit more of the backstory about like Eddie really was a trained musician before he started playing the guitar. Also, what's really cool is one of the other things is like basically said, yeah, because at this point Eddie would have been 24 and said, I've been playing guitar about 8 years. So that means more or less Eddie started playing when he was 15 or 16. The other thing is there's a guy named Steve Rosen who wrote this great book about Eddie and who did a bunch of interviews over the years. So there's a great photo there of Stephen and Eddie taken from that day on the Green Show. And so the thing is that it was a very special moment because there was this kind of convergence before the whole Van Halen thing exploded. And I had the opportunity to see them on that show, and it really kind of changed my life. So the thing about all of this is that if you're watching this, and whether you're young or old, Eddie's influence was just so huge. So for me, just that, if you will, the soundtrack of my life, and then being able to literally, Joe Satriani was my teacher, so part of what happened in my lessons with Joe was we would talk about Eddie, and we'd play different things and experimenting with tapping and whatnot. So, I'm actually in Las Vegas. I'm in my hotel room. I'm going to see Joe and Sammy tonight, and they're going to be playing, guess what, some Van Halen tunes amongst the Sammy Hagar and the Joe Satriani catalog. In any case, this whole thing has been very near and dear to me, so thanks for watching. If by chance you haven't subscribed to the channel, I want to invite you to do so. Don't forget to ring the bell so I can let you know when more videos like this are going to go on online. Also, if you can like and maybe leave some comments below, that'd be great. The next video I'm going to do is taking 3 TONEX 1 pedals and putting them in one pedal board and kind of doing a mini Eddie vibe. One's going to be the amp, and one's going to be kind of the flanger or the phase 90, and then the other is going to be the short delay. And basically creating an Eddie pedal board using TONEX 1. It's going to be pretty cool. In any case, got any questions or comments, leave them down below. Thanks so much for watching this video. Cheers.